This is Nuance. I'm Mike Scala, joined by Jay Carter, also known as Timid, the hip hop artist in the chair of BLM Tokyo. What's going on, Jay?
Actually, finally got a break. A lot of people don't know, most people don't know that the last 2 months, I have been in grad school. I started grad school February 1st and just completed all my work. So within the next 2 weeks, I will be getting my degree. My master's degree will be arriving in the mail. So
Nice.
Oh,
Congratulations. What
congratulations.
is your degree?
Congratulations.
What is your degree in?
marketing with a specialization in digital marketing. So pretty much a lot of what some of my experience has been in. So that's why I was able to breeze through grad school in 2.5 months.
Oh, wow. Very nice.
Yeah.
It's the accelerated program for a master's.
Yeah. Well, the university I went to is Western Governors University, and they do this was a university that was put together probably about 30 some years ago that by I think it was like 17 or 7, I forget what it was, a bunch of US governors,
Okay.
and they do a lot of military people go to this university and whatnot as well because uh, they do different types of things. You can go at your own pace. You don't have to sit in classes. So they lay out the whole course syllabus, and as long as you can get through it, you can get through it as fast as you can get through it, and you'll be done. So it's
All right.
and then demonstrate that you've learned what was in that syllabus, so you don't have to like waste the whole semester
Mm-hmm.
sitting there. So
Nice.
yeah,
Well, congrats. That's a big accomplishment.
yeah, man, appreciate it. I've been quite busy this last couple of months, so I'd put time into it like it was a job so that I
All right.
could really knock it out as quick as possible.
Well, someone else who stays busy, our special guest, we want to welcome Rohan Narine. Thank you for joining us, Rohan. I know
Hmm.
you do a lot of things in the community, a very active guy, and you're going to be talking about Ohm Night, right? What's going on with you?
Yeah, sure. First, Jay and Mike, thank you. I appreciate being on the show. It's Nuance.
Mhm.
And I think so. First of all, disclosure, disclaimer. My wife was on this podcast once,
Yep.
and I am literally trying to copy everything she does. I'm going to be honest. All the good work that she does in the community. I'm looking at it and I'm trying to see how I can legally plagiarize everything she's doing. So she's the real the OG. She's
Mhm.
really put it together for the community and she's laid the groundwork and everyone's just kind of walking and following in her footsteps.
Yeah, I was going to say big
Um,
shoes to fill, right? You're trying to copy what she does.
yeah, and she's a few sizes smaller than me, you know? So, but a little bit about me, very quick. I grew up in the temple. I was like one of those temple kids, like what they would call like a church kid. My uncle is a Hindu priest, so lots of ministering, lots of proselytizing. And in the Hindu faith, you kind of go when there isn't a temple, you go into people's homes and you perform the ceremony, which is called a puja. And the puja, which is the prayers, it culminates in the sermon. And the sermon is where the priest really flexes his and now her, and nowadays his and her muscle. So I found it a little too strict to be the Hindu priest. But I have kept up with my faith in terms of, I would say, my meditative practice. And one thing led to another, and I ended up doing a lot of social justice work in Hinduism, and that's a bit of a niche area. That's where, we think to ourselves, Hinduism isn't about self-realization. We kind of step off the meditative chair. We walk outside of the monastery, and we're not just monks who are praying 12 hours a day, but we want to um, pass on to others what we've learned in the monasteries and the temples. And part of that, really, all of that is giving back. And so, how I've been giving back, We've done beach cleanups. I know, Mike, you're well known about the beach cleanups in Jamaica Bay that we've been doing through a nonprofit called Sadhana for the past 12 years. And those are completely voluntary. We do it with the Park Service and a lot of Hindus. It's true. I'm one, so I can say this. You know, we go to the beach and we want to get a blessing and we leave our statues there. And these statues are not biodegradable. They make a lot of pollution. They really pollute this environment. And so, you know, we work with the Park Service once a month from April to November to clean Jamaica Bay. As Hindus, we also advise non-Hindus what they're looking at. We also see a lot of Hindus who are worshiping while we're there.
Mm,
And it's our job to go up to them and to be very kind and to be very empathetic, and to tell them, hey, look, you know, pray, but take everything back,
right.
you know. So everyone uses this bay, and I'm sure Mother Earth would really appreciate it if we always had somewhere clean to worship, right?
Right. And that's a
Um,
good angle, right? Because my understanding is that respecting Mother Earth is part of the religion. And so if you right take that approach, they're actually following the religion by taking it back.
yeah, yeah, I think, you know, because of modern technology, maybe 500 years ago, the statues were made of clay, they were made of dirt, they were made of a sand, or a plaster that dried, and then you could leave it in the water, and maybe it melted, maybe it dissolved, but doesn't really work that way today, as we know. So, and I'll take one more minute. I don't want to be too long.
Go ahead.
That, yeah,
No,
and
go
so
ahead.
that has led to um, a concept I think that a lot of the liberal Hindus have been working on. So let's just take a step back and see what's going on in the world, right? I know we're probably going to talk about this, the most recent movements at Yale, NYU, Columbia, and different sides that people are taking, right? And a few years ago, and I this is how the open mic nights came about. I was watching like a YouTube video, and Bono from U2, he said that they held a concert in Dubai and they went out to a bar at night to get a beer and they could not find a beer. And Bono was said, that's what's going on here. We need to have comedic open mic nights in places of great tension to relieve the tension. And he looked around. He was like, what if we just looked in Iran or looked at Saudi Arabia and said, what if there were comedy clubs here? It doesn't have to be the alcohol, but what if we had
Right.
comedy clubs?
Right.
And
Right.
and people had a chance to express themselves. People get stressed. People go through a lot in
Sure.
life.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And the biggest, as we know, the movers and shakers in this world are Black comics in America today. Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, what's left of Will Smith, my favorite DL Hughley, uh, you know, big fan of Tommy Davidson. I looked up to Tommy Davidson, the Wayans brothers. You know, I grew up watching Black comedy, and you know, people can really just let loose and get all
Right.
that stress. It takes that stress off, and
Laughter has medicinal purposes, right? Absolutely. Medicinal qualities. And
without a
also,
doubt, yeah.
just
Absolutely.
the therapeutic value of being creative, right? And it also brings people together in a community, right? You have different creatives, and we'll get into this in a minute with your own nights. But people expressing their creativity in different ways is a way to ease tensions and bring people closer together.
Yeah, of course. Of course. I also grew up watching a lot of Jewish comics,
Mm-hmm.
right? So Seinfeld, I don't want to go down the list. So a lot of Jewish comics, I would say Larry David, most recently, it
Right.
is Curb Your Enthusiasm really had its final show, who's to know, right? Um, which brings me to our community in the Guyanese, Caribbean, mainly Hindu community. And you gotta realize in Guyana, there's just one university, you know, so most folks aren't really going to be going to college. And
Mm.
it's a farmer's town. Their cash crop is liquor, is rum, right? It's sugar and rum and gold. So you can imagine what a majority of the Guyanese citizens have, were doing for work before they emigrated to the United States,
Mhm.
right? So you can't blame them if they're just hardworking, insular, isolated community, just like the Bangladeshi community, just like the Nepali community in Jackson Heights, right? There isn't, when you succeed, you kind of want to succeed in a silo. It's hard to share what you have, thinking that you're going to keep everything you have, right? It's totally natural and totally normal. And so we're trying to change things a little bit where you kind of go into a temple and you expect to receive a sermon from a holy text. And we're trying to say, let's not use the bars and the rum shops as locations to have an open mic. Let's do it in a place where we can all get together. Let's do it in a church.
Right.
Let's do it in a temple. So but we just held one. I can explain more. I
Yeah.
want to
So
pause there. Yeah, I want to pause there, but we just held one this past Friday, which was a huge success.
So you're holding open mic comedy nights at you said in the temples?
We have, yeah, and that's so what we have a loose theme. And this past theme was based on the caste system. And we have in India, our ancestor country, we
Mhm.
have like a Gandhi-like figure who was a big a big enemy of the state in terms of the caste system. And a lot of his works, kind of like, Michael Jackson, we're kind of seeing that maybe Michael Jackson was the Messiah. That was a joke. That was a joke. That was a joke. But a lot of his work, if you really think about it, I'm a big Michael Jackson fan, and so I'm big into who Michael Jackson was, and maybe if he was a prophet, we won't see it 300 years in the future. But with this individual, with this Indian freedom fighter, after he passed away, a lot of his work, which was against the caste system, has become our go-to source text. And so that was the theme for the night. But we had three poets who each had delivered their poetry. And I've been working on some stand-up, so I do clean comedy. And mainly I'm working on clean comedy specifically for different Sunday services
hmm,
in the Hindu community.
okay.
So, yeah, my theory is I think that Hindu priests, all Hindu priests, need to take one course in comedy.
That's interesting.
Um, yeah, if you ever been to, when I worked at the mayor's office and they were interfaith events, the faith leaders I remembered most were the rabbis because they were really funny,
Mm,
and
Mm.
they left a really short joke that was effective, something akin to, as we all know, as soon as a Jewish person passes away, they have to be buried immediately. And so, like, a rabbi came up and he said, I was taking a nap at a breakfast and someone wanted to call the
right.
coroner right there. You
Right, right,
know,
right, right.
I had to be like, no, wait, I was just taking a nap.
Yeah, that's a good point, though, right? And maybe this could apply to anyone who endeavors to do public speaking, right? Comedy is a good way to get people's attention, be dynamic, stand out from the crowd. You get a million people coming up speaking. Jay, we touched on this last week. We go to court, and some of the lawyers are just so dry and boring. I mean, not like you want to crack jokes to the judge necessarily, but I think it's a good way to kind of stand out and grab someone's attention if you
Yep.
do it in a subtle way, depending on your audience.
Yeah. I mean, I think, Mike, you can attest to this. Our local elected officials, Joe
Right.
Adabo, Joanne Ariola, and before Joanne was Eric Ulrich, even maybe Jennifer Rajkumar. When they enter into a space, I can tell you the first thing they say is a joke,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of lightens the mood.
Right. It's an
I
icebreaker.
might icebreaker. I myself, I
Mm.
mean, there's only two bald people on this podcast today. But that's my opener. When I go into a space, I look at someone, preferably a man, a middle-aged man who has a thick, full head of hair, and the first thing I say is, "Sir, please, you have to tell me the secret to how you kept all your hair on your head because I need to know."
Right.
you
Right.
know, and so it pokes fun at myself. It lets people kind of like put their guard down a little
Right. It's
bit.
disarming also. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so when I was at the mayor's office, that's pretty much how the Ohm Nights came out.
Right.
I was at the mayor's office in my role. I was a De Blasio guy, and we all we had to do when I was in community affairs, I'll sum up 3 years in 30 seconds. We just gave out proclamation after proclamation
Right.
after
That's
proclamation
right.
to every nonprofit and church and you name it.
Hmm.
If they qualified, Jay and Mike, they got a proc,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and so I got really bored of that job, and so I started to create a few icebreaker jokes
Right. Right.
before
To
I
entertain
read the
yourself, even, right?
Keep
yeah.
yourself,
Keep
yeah. Keep
yourself
yourself
right. And
interested.
just think about that though for a second. Let's take a second to appreciate. We've been talking about the value of comedy. I mean, look at all the adjectives we use and the ways we've described it. We said it had medicinal qualities. We said it brings people together. It builds community. We said it's an icebreaker. It disarms people. It captures people's attention. All these positive attributes for it, right? And so
Of
it isn't
course.
only a matter of, well, we're an aspiring comedian or something like that. I mean, anyone, like to your point, you said even in the temples, a politician, anyone really speaking to people, I think could make use of comedy in a positive way.
Yes, 100%, 100%. And I started to do a few proclamation presentations, and the community said, "Hey, you know, I didn't even remember what the proclamation was for. I just remembered your joke."
Right,
And I
right.
was like, "Huh, really?" And so
So
that's
add that to
pretty,
the list. It's a way to be remembered.
Right.
yeah, exactly. And I was like, you know, maybe, I don't know. And so I started to study like inflection, pausing.
Mm-hmm.
I've been working on my accents. I don't want to go into too much of it, but
Yeah.
I was born in London, so you know, I mean, and I'm born in the same year as Prince Harry, so I've got my
There
Prince
you go.
Harry thing, you know, and I've got my own Megan. Right? I married my own supermodel, Megan, and so I do that every time I take a break. But I was criticized for speaking in the oppressor tongue, so I had to change my accent.
Right.
I was I was in like the colonizer accent there, so
Yeah.
uh, I'm actually working on since we're on the podcast, I'll spill some beans.
Mm-hmm. Exclusive.
I'm working on Darth Vader goes to Trinidad.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, so he takes a look and he says, Luke. He walks into a Trinidadian restaurant and he wants, you know, I'll have doubles with slight pepper, please.
Mm. Okay.
You know, and then maybe they look at him and they say, "Hey, boy, your color's black and red, like I'll be Trinidad, black and red." You know, and then he starts to like move the sauce on his own and say, "How you moving that boy? How he moving sauce on he own boy?" You know, so like, what if Darth Vader went into a Trinidadian restaurant, or um, maybe
Possibilities
Don
are endless.
oh Donald Trump walks into a Hindu temple, you know, and he's like, you know, I don't know who who's holding that mountain, but that monkey is really strong. What's his name? What's that monkey's name? Hanuman, Hanuman, and then all of a sudden, you
Yeah.
know, like Donald Trump is saying a mantra, you know, and
Right. Right.
so but we're the reason I say that is because we're not seeing that. We're not seeing I'm not seeing folks pushing the envelope. I think we want to keep things very PC, and especially in today's times. Um, it would be amazing if we could have, and I heard this too from a Nobel Prize winner. It would be
Mhm.
amazing if we could have, um, we could go into, what if a hungry Muslim child went into a Hindu temple? Would they give him food, right? Or what if a hungry Muslim child went into a synagogue?
Right.
Would that synagogue give him food, right? And so, in order for these things to break down, you have to understand one another. And to understand one another, you have to be around one another. And when you're around one another, you have to understand each other's cultures through storytelling. And so that's how we can really bridge this gap.
Okay. So on that point,
And yeah,
this is called Om night, right? Short for open mic, but also you said Om, like the
Like
meditation
this, like a
sound.
meditation chant.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Second Friday of the month. It's at, it was at 10520 101st Avenue, Ozone Park. That's the
Yep.
temple.
Yep.
Now, this is a Hindu temple, but it's open to people outside of just the Hindu faith, right?
Yes. Yes. Open to anyone, any race, any culture. It's a completely safe space. We have community rules. We have 10 specific rules that we've drafted that when you sign up, you agree to adhere to before entering the space. No
Mhm.
xenophobia, no Islamophobia, no homophobia. So there's a first rule with all the no's. And then the second
Right.
rule, step up, step back, right? Give everyone their time, just as you would. And so there's a number of rules that we have. Listening is learning, right? Learning is teaching. So sometimes when you listen, you want to be careful that you give someone their space because you're also learning. And in order to be a good teacher for oneself, we have to always be open-minded. Certain things like two ears, one mouth, right? We have two ears and one mouth. We should listen twice as much as we speak. And then sometimes some events can be traumatic. So we have a rule where if you feel trauma, we give you the right to leave the space, no questions asked. We're not gonna, even if you're in mid-performance or you're listening to a performance and something triggers you and you need to step away, we give both the audience and performers time for that, to take a pause and to kind of like step back and recenter ourselves.
Right.
And this is a new thing, it's not really being done in the Caribbean Hindu community. Churches are just used for worship, for eating some prasadam, which is small snacks, and then after the service you would go home, right? So we're
Mhm.
we're really trying to cater to folks of all ages, all backgrounds. We have some themes that we want to stick to, but we want to open it up. We want to see if there's anyone who is interested in being challenged, right? Are you an amazing public speaker? Have you gotten straight A's in all your classes with oratory, marketing, presentations? Do you have dreams of going to law school, right? Do you want to work on, I mean, I'm maybe speaking to a lawyer here, Mike, right? But when you got to speak to a judge, you got to speak up and you got to stand up there without a teleprompter, and what better way to do that than getting up here, making some mistakes when
Right.
it counts for nothing right now to make these
Right.
mistakes, and do it for when that time comes for when it account for something. So,
Yeah, it's a good way to
and
sharpen your sword, so to speak.
and let
I love
it makes and other people can meet each other, right?
Right.
People can
Right.
meet
I
each
love
other.
to
Yeah,
talk
people
about
sometimes
how,
recommend acting classes, right? And in fact,
right, I was
in law
gonna say
school,
that.
I took a class called Acting for Lawyers, and this
Mm,
reminds me of that in a way, right? Is doing something
wow.
outside the immediate practice of the law, but I can come together. Anyone can come together, no matter what your profession is, whatever your background is. It could be useful in your own way, and then, like you said, it's a way to meet other people and network and build. And you could all share this in common, even if you have very diverse and different backgrounds.
Of
Right.
course.
People
Yeah.
recommend, said like you did the acting class, people recommend, doing some sort of a stage performance at least once to get
Mm-hmm.
that experience, to
Mm.
get that feeling of being in front of people, of being on stage, having to command that space and that room and whatnot. It's a good experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's a skill for anyone, right? It's a
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, a
Absolutely.
thousand percent.
And stand-up
Um,
comedy is often one of the things that people recommend. Like try a, open mic night
Right.
sometime.
And
yeah.
so that's a good point also because this, I see your flyer here, and Joe, we can get the flyer up in the chat. Poets, singers, storytellers, comedians, this is your stage. So it isn't just for comedy, right? This is just your
Right.
time to do what you do. And how much time do you give each performer?
Yeah, great question. We don't have a limit. It's from 6 to 9, and on Friday, April 19, we did have three poets who went up, and they took their time. I mean, it ranged from anywhere from like 7 minutes to 15 minutes. Um, we actually had, Shanita Liu, who is Guyanese, lives out on the island, married to a Marine of Asian descent, a big Shakti worshiper, and she did like a Mary J. Blige rap,
Mm,
about how her goddess empowers her when she's stressed out or she needs to really meditate and get in the zone, and she gives thanks to, Mother or Durga Ma, and she had a very creative rap, and I think she just busted out into some old school tune, It was like right in the middle. She was like on and on and on and on and on. And I was like, whoa. You know, she
Uh,
just she took it back, and but it was Hindu, you
right.
know,
That's cool.
and it was dope, you know, it was really dope. And we also had a poet speak about I think I may get her name correct, but it may be a longer name, which was Gentilly. And she was a LGBTQ performer who passed away. And I think at St. Patrick's Cathedral, where they held her funeral, it was full of the recent controversy. It was full of LGBTQ folks who, you know, 50 or 60 years ago wouldn't have even been allowed to be in that space.
Right.
And, you
Right.
know, they're celebrating her life and her times. And there was this like almost reverse blasphemy, you know, where it's not blasphemous to be in that space. It's blasphemous if you were not in that space, right?
Mhm.
And, you know, we have to make these things a bit, you know, there's a lot of LGBTQ persecution that goes on in the Caribbean, right? We all know what goes on in Jamaica at night if you're a member of the LGBTQ community. And some folks may or may not know, but that homophobia runs rampant in Guyana,
Sure.
and Trinidad as well. So you know, I would appeal to comics of all genders, of all backgrounds, to storytellers of all genders, races, and backgrounds. Um, you know, this is a safe space. There's a lot of controversial stuff in our text, like maybe I think I'll go here, but our one of our saviors, almost like a Christ-like figure, was persecuted, and it's very controversial, but he was made to dress as a woman
Mm.
when he was exiled to protect himself from being found. So, you know, in our faith, does that count as queer, right? Did that person have any questions? And so some Hindus do believe that that Arjuna was queer, that you know he wasn't a fully cisgender hetero male. Um, and this is the space to ask those questions. This is the space to say your poem about something that mainstream Orthodox Hinduism may not agree with.
Wow.
So and so that's why it's also in the Shakti space. It's a very long name, right? It's the Mari Amma Temple.
Hmm.
That's not you, if you notice that's it doesn't say Krishna, right? This is not a one of the Orthodox. This isn't like Shiva or Ganesha.
Hmm.
The Shakti Mari Amma, the predominantly female energy, it allows, as you said, Mike, it allows for creativity. It allows for brainstorming. It allows for making mistakes, right? Um, so that's what we're doing. Our next one is June 14. So our focus is on Pride Month and also Juneteenth. And so I have a lot of folks I reach out to. I text about 100 people to get ready for every event because, as you know, 10% show up.
Sure.
So
Sure.
if you do, right, out of 100, expect 10, out of
Right.
200, expect 20.
That's true.
So
That's true.
yep, so
We
I
had
do
that same
my
rule of thumb, by the way, when we did hip hop shows back in the day, right? You give out
Right.
1,000 flyers, all right, maybe 100 people, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe, you know.
Yeah,
So
maybe.
we that philosophy still rings true. There was just about like 12 folks or 13 folks at our first open mic.
Okay.
And yeah, even if you guys are interested, both I don't know where you're located, Jay. You're out of state?
A little bit further than that, I'm in Japan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, we would love to just get a projector up there one day and maybe even stream, you
Oh,
know,
that'd
and
be great.
have, yeah, we
That'd
have
be
folks
great.
in different parts of the
And,
world
and
come
by the
up.
way, I don't know if you know this, Jay and I still do hip hop music. I'm working on my new project. Jay is on it. So it'd be cool if we can arrange some kind of performance with both of us performing at this.
Juneteenth, I mean, think about it, June 14. We have someone, his name is Kamel. He's from One World Fest, which is a global it's a nonprofit with global ambition to build bridges by highlighting different aspects of every culture. And they have a annual event at JPAC, Jamaica Performing Arts Center, every year. So he's a good contact to have because he has a lot of networks and a
Sure.
lot of contacts. And yeah, I know you're working on, is this a new album you're working
Yes,
on, Mike? Yeah.
absolutely. I'm trying to
So
get
let me
the mixes done. I get very obsessive when it comes to getting them just right, especially nowadays when people are listening in earbuds and phone speakers and all kinds of things. So it
Mm,
isn't only a matter
mm,
of making sure it sounds good in a high end system,
mm,
but make sure it sounds good everywhere, even on lower end,
mm,
mixing is a
speakers.
nightmare.
Yeah, so I'm really taking my
mm.
time to get that right because I want this to be special. It is special. I want to make sure it lives up to that in terms of
What
sound quality.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I mean, my younger brother, he's actually a professional DJ. So we had the huge amplifiers, huge speakers.
Yeah.
It was just when the DJ world was transitioning from the Techniques turntables over to the Pioneer,
CDJs.
the
Yeah,
CDJs. Yeah, so
CDJs.
like my brother was one of the first to get the Pioneer CDJ 1000 Mark One.
Mm.
Now they have like the 3000 something with the screens and everything. I don't even
Mhm.
think they take CDs anymore, but
Right. Right. And
um
it used to be the DJ was not the guy that you envied or the girl that you envied because they would
mm,
be there carrying the crates and they had all their
hmm
records with them. And right, it was a big thing.
hmm
Now
hmm
it's kind of funny you go to an event and they're just there with a laptop. It's like, oh man, I guess
yeah.
it looks
I,
like such an easier job than it used to be because you don't have to carry things anymore.
I remember those
Yeah.
days because we had to, when I was DJing, we had to carry the crates of vinyl
Mhm.
and we're talking the big speakers. I mean, like the speakers would be like 4 or 5 feet tall, and these just big, massive speakers with woofers, and we'd have to carry those into the venue and stuff. It was crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Times have changed.
They
Times have
definitely.
really
I want to
changed.
ask a question because you're holding these, and you mentioned that this is kind of the first time these are being held in like in the temples. How is I know you've already done one, but how is this being received that you're doing this type of event in this religious space? How is the that being received?
Mm,
Any pushback, or people are like, "Oh, this
I
is a great
think,
do this," or
yeah, that's a good question. I think if I was blind to some of the criticism, I would say, great, it's been nothing but, roses. Um, I think that this is something that will probably hit its peak in about a year, you know? I think it's slow to germinate. It is taking time. Um, I also teach a chess class every Sunday in a Hindu temple. It was in a yoga studio, but we're looking to shift it over to a Hindu temple. It's a little bit bigger. And the reason I say that is because um, anything that's setting a precedent or anything that hasn't been done before, it's a bit slow to grow.
Right.
So this is like planting the seed right now, Jay, which is and waiting for the roots to take hold, and then maybe in like a year we'll start to see some branches. That's what I'll tell you. But right now it's a bit slow. I think it's definitely unorthodox. People aren't used to it.
right?
They may expect this. Nears every month. Nears does an open
Hmm.
mic.
Yep.
Yeah, so and they have some well-known comedians and comics, and so we kind of want to get to that level, but doing it this way. And it would be nice to have like clean Hindu comedy. So I don't think that's really been done. I've interviewed a lot of folks who said they haven't really seen clean Hindu comedy because
Right.
um a lot of the experts who know Hinduism, they're not comedians.
Mm,
So
Yeah.
those are like the swamis, the gurus, the priests, and they don't want to make this thing. They don't want to make this thing into a satire. So
right,
it'll
right.
take some time. Yeah, it'll take some
Yeah.
time, Jay.
Anytime you do something new and groundbreaking, you're gonna get that, right? There'll be growing pains, maybe some pushback, some criticism, some bumps in the road. But these are all what are expected, and I think a sign that you're doing something worth doing, right? I mean, if
Yeah,
it wouldn't be easy.
yeah,
It wouldn't, if it was easy, it probably wouldn't be worth doing it. So,
yeah. And the other thing we're trying to do too, I should definitely say this. We are, long story short, we're compensating every performer. Either to the tune of 50 or $100.
oh wow,
And yeah, we try to have a budget, and we have a $500 budget for this event, and so we try to put 100 or two into food, and then the rest we try to use into paying performers.
Wow.
We've done a lot of research into this, and true economic justice is when the performers are economically liberated directly after an event. That's what we think. and we have been to, experienced a lot of, and have been in the aftermath of events where artists were paid, promised to be paid, and they never received anything.
Right. Right.
Or if they did, you are, oh, the check is in the mail. You didn't get the check? It's like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
sent it. I sent that check, and
Well, here's what
Happens a
they're
lot.
used to. Your payment is the exposure, right? Oh, come on. Do it for the love or do it for the exposure. Or there'll be people in the audience who you can network to and you can, that's what it always is. And it's like none of that pays the bills.
yeah, it's like I told you to fix the rank because you're gonna get all the exposure.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, it's like next month I'm gonna pay my rent with that exposure from the event.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it
Write
never
that
works
down
out.
on your check, right?
Yeah,
Exposure.
yeah.
Yeah,
No,
it
it's
never
a big
works.
scam. I'm really happy to hear that. That's
Yeah, really.
in itself because it is a racket, right? From these so-called promoters trying to get people to perform. And listen, open mic nights, I don't think people necessarily expect to get paid generally,
Right.
but the fact that you are even doing that, endeavoring to compensate people even a little bit, I think is truly a big thing, right? And maybe that
Yeah, and
changes the narrative because performers should be compensated for their time.
and they might do really, really quickly on this. Um, if we pay an artist, they might even want to get better,
Mm-hmm.
right? They
Yeah.
might say, "Oh, yo, man, they believed in me. I should believe in myself." And they might
Right.
they might want to really rehearse and get better. And like, yo, I'm getting like at least $50 out of this, and or we at least someone came from Harlem, so we just actually paid for his ride back. We didn't pay him
Right.
anything,
Yeah.
Right.
but we paid for his Uber back, which was $60. You
Right.
know.
Right. But that's also a good point because an artist may feel like they need to bring their A game if they're being paid,
Mm,
right? It's not a joke.
Right.
mm,
It's not something that they can just mess around with because they don't want to waste everyone's time and everyone's money now, right? It's an
Mhm.
investment. It's like you're investing in their performance and it may bring out the best in them.
Yeah, no, you say it better than me, Mike. I mean, there's a difference between pro bono legal work and legal work, right?
Exactly, exactly. And I've been told the same thing, by the way, even when I've offered to do certain things pro bono,
Mm,
some very smart clients have said, no, we want to
mm,
pay you because we want you to treat this like one of your most important cases. We don't want this to be a side project or, this free thing that you're doing for your pro bono hours. You know what I mean? They understand that everyone, whether you like it or not, obviously you try to devote your full attention to everything, but it's human nature, right? That, if
hmm
someone's investing in you, you might give more to it.
Yep,
Right.
yep, yeah, yeah. I mean, so that's pretty much it. I think you gave me so much time. During the open mic I hosted, no one gave me this much time. So, so no one wanted to listen to me during my own
Yeah.
open mic. But
Well,
it was it
happy
was
to hear
yeah.
that. I just want to, so before we wrap up on this, so I see on your flyer here you have these different topics. Do people have to stick to those topics? Can they deviate from them? Is it a guideline? What is that? So you mentioned Prime Juneteenth next time. You also have Raksha Bandhan on August 9th.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
you've got gender
Yeah.
equity on October 11th and human rights on December 13th.
Yeah, those are definitely loose guidelines. We want anyone who is honoring that particular holiday or day of memory in that month, they can resurrect that. For example, Raksha Bandhan is literally brotherly love. It's where you tie a piece of string around someone who you would call your brother, and it's done between like younger sisters and older brothers, or a female and a male who they seem to be to have brotherly affection for, brotherly love for. And as you know, in the world, we could really use some of that. You know, I think to myself, there is a chance we can get back to a world before October 7, right?
Mhm.
And there's a lot of these strange things that are going on. There was J6, right? Then there's October 7, right? Are we ever gonna go back to a world like that? We don't know, but at least we ourselves can try to be change agents
Right.
to try to make that happen, right? In our own block, in our own town, in our own community.
Mhm.
And with the hope that, it spreads, it germinates and it spreads. So that's another reason we're trying to do this. Like we're all connected globally now, right? So if we
Sure.
can if we can have a set of set of open mics that whose message we'd love to have co-sponsors from the Muslim community, from the Jewish community for these future events, and have them come together and share songs and share stories, and then in the future, we also want to go to their community. We're trying to do have these at a Unitarian church in Brooklyn, in Williamsburg. If that does kick off, then we can promote this philosophy of having open mics in the temple space in different parts of New York City. So we have way too many cultures here, right? Way too many cultures in New York City, to from Chinatown to Little Italy to Little Guyana um to gosh knows how many Puerto Ricans live in New York City, you
I
know?
would amend that and say way too many cultures to not be intermingling with each other.
Right, because that's really what makes
Yeah,
it so great,
yeah.
right?
That's
But I
what you
think our
want, right?
problem,
So many.
right?
Yeah.
No, no, absolutely, Jay. I agree with that. I think that's what makes us so great as a city. And even if you look at Queens, right, just as a microcosm, the most diverse county on the mainland US, but we often overlook the fact that we are too segregated, right? We need to be
Mm,
coming together more because we are so
hmm
diverse. But the next
hmm
step, right? The next logical step is let's celebrate that diversity. Let's come together. Let's share in that diversity and not all keep to ourselves.
Right.
Agree, agree,
Yeah. Yeah.
agree. Yeah, I think I touched on all the points I needed to, Mike. No one's
Excellent.
ever given me this much time.
Well, okay,
Um,
so we have
yeah.
the flyer up in the chat. For those listening, where can people go to sign up to perform or learn more about it?
I would say if it's up there, take your phone out, take out the camera. We have a QR code. That'll take you to a registration page and then register. It's free. There's no 2 drink minimum. We don't want anyone to pay anything. In fact, we're paying performers. So we're kind of flipping the mantra on its head a little bit. If you're
Yeah,
courageous, you want to sign up, you want to say a joke, you have a story, you have a song. You may even get some money out of it, but more importantly, we're just trying to bring folks together. If you know anyone, if you want to come and just not participate, you want to sit in the back and take in a really good evening. I'm the MC, so you can get a sense of,
nice.
my energy and how I can move a program from one agenda item to the next, right? So it's always I try to make things fun and expect more outreach. We have some time. June 14th is about a month and a half away.
Right.
So, I got a lot of time to invite a lot of people. So it should be, I'm hoping to see you there at one of them, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely plan on doing that. It's funny. I was just thinking back to an experience I had going to an open mic night where you had these performers doing these overly indulgent poems and going on and on for a long time. And then you had someone come up and they said something like, I always said that if I did an open mic night, I would do a haiku. I think if I did an open mic, I would
Mm,
do a haiku. And that was it, right? It was just those two
mm.
lines. And they got the biggest reaction of anyone. It was like 10 out of 10, perfect.
Oh,
You beat everyone.
oh wow, that's funny. That's
Yeah.
so funny. There was on that note, that's a much better story than what I'm going to say right now. But my uncle who's a priest when I was a kid, he was just calling who wanted to give a speech, anyone for like this person's birthday, and like 50 people came up. We were all exhausted, and they just invited this little kid. He was 3 years old, and said, "Come wish this person happy birthday." And he took the mic, and he said, "I don't want to say anything," and just that was it. And we're like,
Yeah.
"Wow, he waited 3 hours to say that."
Right.
But think about it, 20 years later, I didn't remember anyone else's speeches except for his speech.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, right.
So sometimes, it's like the most awkward comment is the one that you remember the longest.
And then you start analyzing it, thinking, oh, that's really an existential thing to say. He doesn't want to say anything, but he's saying so much and not saying anything.
Right. You could
Yeah,
really.
yeah,
So this is
yeah.
a home night. The next one's on June 14th. The thing posted up was on the blog for hindusforhumanrights.org.
Yes, yes, that's our website. You can learn more about us there. We are very left. We are pro-Palestine. We are pro-social justice. We are pro-democracy. It's like a salmon swimming upstream. We know that. and we get a lot of haters, but we're trying to move the needle more towards progress every day. So it's on our website there. We wrote a little blog about it, and it's something that we hope will grow over time.
And you got
So
vegetarian dinner provided, so I'm all about that.
Oh yeah, it's our traditional, they call it Creole, like cook-up rice, or there's a Trinidadian word for it, but I think it's chili con carne, which is Spanish for chili with meat. But it's been, yeah, it's been turned into an English word, chili con carne. But yeah, we have cook-up rice and salad and all the soda you can drink.
Okay, sounds good.
nice.
Nice,
So
yeah.
we do want to segue here. I know you were mentioning Palestine. I wanted to look at the tweet, actually the statement that public advocate Jumaane Williams put out. He was speaking, of course, on the protests at Columbia and other colleges that seem to have gotten a little out of hand, and perhaps in a way that detract from the overall message. I think his overall
Mm.
statement here is basically just to turn the temperature down because some of the rhetoric can detract from the positive messages that you wish to convey.
Yeah. And what was the statement?
And so I'm trying to pull it up here. I went to
Yeah,
the
it looks long.
it's long. There's five parts to it. The first
Hmm.
one here, I mean, just to give you the overview, he says the Columbia protest on campus formed as a nonviolent but disruptive, as most protests are, movement, which should
Hmm.
have remained largely peaceful, was escalated by arrests, then corrupted, as some have tried to seize the spotlight to spew anti-Semitism. And so he's saying, don't let that be the narrative, right? Don't let
Right.
Hmm.
anti-Semitism take over the message that you're trying to convey. And certainly, as a student or as anyone, you have a right to protest and use your First Amendment rights to do that. That's really the cornerstone of our democracy, I think. But it's
Hmm.
easy to let that uh, positive thing, right? That the positive protest, that positive statement that you may be trying to make, be clouded by some of this negative rhetoric. And oftentimes, what ends up happening is it's really co-opted by
That's
extreme
what I was
voices, right? Right. So maybe the overwhelming majority of people there might have that positive message and don't have any intention of it turning into that. But unfortunately, it only takes a few people to disrupt and derail the entire thing, and then that becomes a story, right?
right.
And that's the danger.
Yeah, because especially if you're protesting something that's very much controversial, there are going to be people who are looking for those those points in your argument where they can change the narrative to whatever they want it to be. And so if you're criticizing someone, they're going to look for that point where they can be like, well, it's this that you're talking about, not this, and just completely, like you said, derails or co-ops the whole meaning of the
Sure.
message.
I mean, and Jay,
Yeah.
also as a BLM leader, right? Black Lives Matter, you've dealt with that phenomenon, I'm sure, because you see that
Absolutely.
all the time with that
Even
movement.
before that, just even just the being black in America, any sort of criticism or any sort of thing that's brought up, there's always someone looking for how to change that to something completely different
Right.
and not look at it for what it is. So yeah.
Yeah, and I want to say something quick
Yeah.
before I do have to run off.
Yeah.
I'd love to stay. I'd love for an invite next to the next podcast if I can, because
Okay.
this is a lot. This is a lot more interesting than I thought. This is
You thought we were dull.
um
I know, right?
yeah. But one quick thing, and I think the current event aspect certainly needs discussion. So I would love to join the next week's podcast at Nuance, where I'm not talking about my stuff, but we can
Mhm.
have a more equal discussion about current events and then things that we're all doing together.
Yeah.
But I love to learn more about the album as well, right?
Sure.
Um, and you never know, maybe we can even have like a West Indian type of themed few songs composed for your next album. You never know.
Mm. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
on this, before I have to run, I wanted to tell Jay, my wife and I just watched, as we all know, O.J. Simpson recently passed away at 76 of
Mhm.
cancer, and we Netflix is showing one of an O.J. special from ESPN, I think like the rise and fall of O.J. Simpson.
Mhm.
And I think what Jay said is, it just happens over time. When the case was supposed to be about the murder of Nicole and Ron Brown, and then it became about Mark Furman's use of the N-word, and the whole case just went straight to race, and then it became quickly divided, and then the lines were drawn, and all of a sudden it became like a race war, and
Mhm.
it was never meant to be that, never meant to be that. So I think, and that was before the age of social media and cell phones.
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah,
now,
right. Yeah, and I see this over and over again. That's a perfect example of it. But just as an attorney, when people try to discuss cases in the news, I'm like,
mm,
let's focus on the legal issues here. But the legal issues take the back seat in the public
hmm
discourse to these bigger emotional political issues, right? Race, gender, whatever it is. And
hmm
that does cloud what we're there to do, which is to figure out the law and the facts. But
mm,
maybe that's less sexy or appealing to the average person, and
true,
you get a different narrative.
true,
Yeah, I
true.
think we're
But with
gonna
that, yeah,
see
let me,
that trial. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, I'm gonna run. I would love
Okay.
to stay. But
All right.
Jay, we just scratched the surface.
Yes, absolutely. Thank
Yeah,
you
we
so much
just
for
scratched
coming
the
on,
surface.
Rohan, and
And
we
I will
hope to
be
see
in,
your
yeah.
crowds grow. We definitely want to be a part of it in the future.
Yeah, and do feature me for another podcast. I'd love to be on again. I'd text you
Okay.
after this. So thank
Sounds
you,
great.
Jay.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Mike.
All
Thank you,
right.
All
guys.
right.
We'll talk.
Okay.
Have a good evening.
Bye bye.
You too. Bye.
Yeah. So definitely an interesting guy. And these events seem like a good thing, right? It seems like it's
All right.
has a good mission, to try to bring people together. And even as we were opening, comedy and just the performance element in general is a good thing. I think there's really only upside to that. There's nothing bad about that, right? It
All
just
right.
it helps people in a myriad of ways.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right, I just pulled up the rest of the public advocate statement. He's talking about, he says, on this first night of Passover, as protests spread to NYU and campuses across the country, the fears of Jewish students are real and warranted, as are the frustrations of people genuinely speaking out for peace, but being heard as hateful.
Mhm.
We need to be able to see the strong, clear difference between being pro Palestinian rights and being anti Semitic. Those lines are blurred by the media and bad actors, and crossed when Jewish students are accosted and threatened for their own identities and beliefs. There is no place for hatred, threats, or violence on our campuses or in our city, but there must be places for nonviolent yet disruptive protest and for meaningful dialogue about the path to lasting peace, justice, and freedom. And then he closes by saying something that basically we just had said here. New York, in its diversity of experiences, backgrounds, and voices, should be that space.
Right. I mean, that's absolutely true, and I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah, you can have your protests and be pro-Palestinian, but you don't have to bring in the anti-Semitism. You can be against what the Israeli government is doing, what Netanyahu is doing, that type of ideology, but that doesn't paint a whole people,
Yeah.
right? And so it doesn't have that space. And so, it's gonna be when you get into volatile situations like that, there are gonna be extremists that are on each side that want to take that moment to use those extreme views, to put those extreme views more in the forefront. And
Right.
that's gonna hurt the total message there,
But then what do
right?
you do, right? I mean, aside from this, talking about it, denouncing it, commending people like Jumadi Williams for putting out a statement like that, aside from that, what can you do? Because you're going to be at a protest that is going to have a lot of people there, all with their own points of view. Not everyone is going to be exactly on the same page. And it is easy to see it get derailed, get taken over by these voices. And as we've discussed previously, it doesn't mean that the loudest voices represent the most people, but it creates that impression because they're the loudest, right? And so they drown out everyone else's voices. You could have 10 people shouting extreme things that drown out the hundreds who were protesting peacefully.
Right, because those 10 people shouting those extreme things are gonna be the bigger spectacle, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
the one that you're gonna report on because that's gonna get the most controversy and the most
right,
views,
right.
eyes. this type
Right,
of
and
thing.
they're also going to come off maybe the most dynamic in a sense, or
Right.
at least draw the most attention because maybe they're more passionate, they're more animated, right? They're physically louder, right? They're more violent in their movements, whatever it is. They're drawing attention to themselves, and that is going to suck up the energy of the whole protest.
Right. So I mean, in cases like that, I would say like the organizers of an event like that should keep their message clear. They should make sure to denounce things that they're not affiliated with, so that they can get their core message through, and so that the people that they're trying to get through to will listen to them. And on the opposite side, the people that they're trying to get through, um, can be less reactive because I mean, if you're being protested against, you're already going to be on the defense. But for there to be any sort of consensus, and this is what we talk about, nuance here, you got to understand that not everyone's going to see things from your point of view
Mm-hmm.
and try to hear what they're saying. You may still disagree with it, but don't automatically jump to the extremist view as indicative of the whole.
Right.
Kind of listen to where, like, if the protesters, the organizers were, this was the message that they're saying, look at that and see where the common ground might be, or see, how much they agree or disagree with those extremist views. And then you can make that. You still may
Right.
disagree.
Sure.
That's,
Sure. And,
but
and that's
it's
the problem also because these things get weaponized so much. So
right.
there are many who aren't looking for that nuance. They're
Right.
looking to paint it in a certain light, right? And so
Sure.
if you have peaceful protesters who are saying, no, we're just against this one particular policy, but you have
Right.
people who disagree with that view. And so they're looking to cast it in the most negative light possible. And so they're going to focus
Sure.
on the extreme voices. They're going to say, no, look, it was just a hate rally or whatever, right?
Right.
Without actually trying to look for that nuance because they're not looking for an honest
Sure.
conversation. They're looking to further their own agenda in those cases,
Absolutely.
right? And that's also a danger in those extreme voices being so prevalent because it gives others the ammunition to discredit your whole movement.
Absolutely. And again, like you said, that's what they want to do because, I mean, out from the outset, they're not going to agree because I mean, that's kind of the point of you protesting
Right.
what their view is. So they're going to be looking for any way to discredit what it is that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, um,
But it's
yeah,
so
but
it's crazy though, right? Because it seems so easy for a movement to fall into lost credibility, right?
sure.
Based on the media narrative, right? Based on people picking up on those extreme voices. But it just seems like the entire message can get lost. I mean, I think back to Occupy Wall Street when that
Yeah,
started out, right? So many positive messages. I think a lot of people, even on both sides of the aisle, were agreeing with a lot of what was being said. And then it kind of devolved into something where maybe it's partially the media's fault, partially people who were there and kind of co-opted it, but it turned into something else where it also became a laughing stock as time went on. You know what I mean? And then you lose those positive messages that were there initially.
right. Yeah, it's easy to do that because, there are going to be people who want that to be the point, you know.
Yeah.
And so they will elevate those extreme views or those views that may not be representative of the whole
Right.
and try to make that the new focal point of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to understand also when you're dealing with an issue like this,
Right.
Israel and Palestine, emotions are going to be high, especially if you're of the Jewish faith, if you're of the Muslim faith, right? If you are uh, directly impacted by this in some way, maybe you have family over there or what have you.
Right.
You're talking about war, people being killed, right? So
Yeah,
obviously, we can sit here and talk about, well, look for the nuance in it, but it's harder for people who are dealing with death and destruction to
absolutely.
be that rational about it.
Yeah, I mean, if my family had been wiped out, yeah, I'm probably not trying to hear the nuance at that point,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's either side, I would try and I don't want to hear what you're trying to say at this
right,
point, I mean, you might just go to that extreme view because you have so much pain, so
yeah,
it's a difficult situation.
yeah. Or you may even view a more rational, nuanced view as extreme because it differs from yours, right?
Absolutely. That's a good point. That's a good point.
So
So yeah, people will see that. And I think we're seeing that a lot. That people calling for these ceasefires and this pro-Palestinian um, viewpoint are being painted as being pro-Hamas because, you know, people want that narrative is to be out there because that changes the thing. Where other people are like, no, we're talking about 30,000 plus men, women, and children that have been killed. Like we want to stop this.
yeah,
And so, you know, it makes it a murky mess when really we should all look at, you know, are there people being killed?
yeah, yeah. Humanity, right? Maybe it goes back
Right,
to what Rohan was talking about, like he opened up by talking about you couldn't get a beer in Dubai, but what about a comedy night, right? What
right,
about something that can bring people together? We may
right,
not look at comedy as a serious thing, right? I mean, by its definition, it's a joke. It's supposed to make us laugh. The clowns, right? But there is very positive societal value in something like that, especially at a time like this, right? And that goes for
right.
all entertainment, I think. Where was it that I heard that I forgot who said it, but there was a discussion about policy and how it might have even been Al Franken. I don't know, but about how you get into politics and you try to change people's hearts and minds by putting forth these policy agendas and these bills and this legislation and all that kind of stuff. And that's all good, and people need to do it, but you find that you leave a bigger impact on people, and you actually move people to act more with a joke or with a song or with a story, right? That actually is more impactful on people if you're trying to motivate them
Right,
than policy is alone. And so I think
right,
maybe to be most effective, we need to be combining the two.
right. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, you know, storytelling and connection is,
Yeah.
you know, one of the most important things.
Right.
Uh,
Right. It's the most humanizing thing.
yeah.
And so you
So,
can see how in a time like this, especially, right, that's a great way to try to bring people together. I mean, I think it's great what Rohan mentioned. He's starting out obviously in the Hindu temples, but if you can have people of all faiths, and maybe even you can end up at other types of places of worship, and kind of just bring this all together and enable people to look at each other as the same, right? Yeah, we have
yeah,
these distinct religions and cultures and backgrounds and everything, but we can all laugh at the same jokes. We can all enjoy the same poetry or what have you. It's a way to get people together and see each other as humans, which I think
absolutely.
is a very powerful motivator.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
all right, we need a poll. We didn't come up with a poll before we got on here. I think there probably is a good poll in this discussion. If we can kind of freestyle one about, I don't know, should we talk about the rhetoric being toned down, protest being co-opted? What do you think?
Probably. Yeah, something along those lines.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything specific in mind?
Um, um, uh, I mean, hmm, I was thinking about it as far as the rhetoric, but a lot of people will agree that
They
rhetoric
will
should be
agree, I'm
toned
sure.
down.
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
yeah.
you would hope that they agree that the rhetoric should be turned down. So, um,
Something like, do you fear that the messages are being lost by the extreme voices in the protests?
yeah, the core messages.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, let's rock with that.
Okay. Um, okay. So I'm just trying to think of how that would all sound as a nice soundbite here. Um, okay,
Off the
let's
top.
try this. Let's try
So,
this off the top of the head. The poll question of the week is: do you fear that the core messages in the Israeli Palestinian protests are being lost amidst the extremist voices that are co opting them?
okay. All right.
Let's see. See if we
I
can
think
work with that one.
I think we can work with that one. I
Okay.
think we can work with that one. Yeah.
All right.
Uh,
Well, speaking of polls, we had one from last week as well, right?
we did have one from last week, and this stemmed off of your trip. Um, and that was you picked up that newspaper and saw that there was some political messages. It seemed a little bit overtly political, which was a
Mhm.
little odd for local media. So the question was, do you believe your local media are too political or not political enough? And so in this poll, we had 71% said yes. 29% said no. Um,
What does that mean?
yeah, that's what I'm thinking about that right now when we my that was my probably my fault putting in the wrong responses
Yeah, probably
on
should
the
have said
poll.
too political, not political enough instead of yes or no.
Right,
But
right.
we maybe could read that. I don't know. You can't really, but maybe the yes could apply to the first. I think that's probably if you're going to say yes or no, right? The first part of the question, I would say would be the
Right. There are some comments though.
yeah.
So we'll go with that. I just
Okay.
realized that, and that's my bad. But local journalism is suffering because local vested interests have been moving into a dominant position to push coverage one way or the other. So in my present locale, any sort of interpretation of local political sensitive content is avoided. So that's one person there.
Okay.
Someone
Are
did
people
call me
saying at
out.
all where they're from? I'm curious about that too.
No, they're not.
Okay.
One person says publishing 101, sponsorship dictates content, follow the money. Let's see
Yeah, but
another
who's sponsoring these local papers? Usually it's local businesses.
one. Right. So yeah, I think that was just it seems like one of those knee-jerk reactions to media in
Right.
general.
Right.
Um, there's another response here that says there's a fairly good job being done by the struggling local paper in their Oklahoma town.
There you go, Oklahoma. Okay.
So that's good. Local sports and crimes take center stage. No attempt is made to replicate national news. Direct editorials are on touchy subjects are avoided,
Okay.
but there is a wide variety of guest columns and op-eds reflecting diverse points of view. So it sounds like their area is doing pretty good about being um, very balanced.
Yeah, and they said something in there that I thought was interesting. They said they don't try to replicate the national,
Right.
and that I think is what I had found in that New Jersey paper because it was on its face a paper about local issues, these three cities in New Jersey, but
Mm,
all the stories, sure, they tie them to those New Jersey cities, but they all had the flavor of national politics.
right.
And that's something that you don't see a whole lot of in our local papers here in Queens. Yeah, there's some of that, and people have their opinions, and some try to read that into it. But at least on its face, it tends to be more about what's happening locally, you know. And if
Right.
anything, if I were to make a gripe about the biases in some of these papers, I would say, regardless of the party or of the politics, they tend to be pro incumbent in a sense because they work with who's in office. And, you know, if something happens, that official is usually on the scene or has staff there, or they reach out to them for a quote and they get the story from them. And so, you know, maybe the elected official funds a park or a computer lab in a school, and there's a big local paper. Who's going to cover it, right? The local paper. And so, if you read these
Right.
local papers, you usually see all the fabulous things that your elected officials are doing, and then in that regard, you could see it as very pro incumbent, right? Especially if you're an insurgent candidate, you're challenging these incumbents. You pick up the paper and you read, you know, assembly member just has this gigantic check for the local school or something, and it's like, oh, you know, look at all this pro incumbent coverage that's in there. So that happens regardless of party, right? You could have a Democratic incumbent or a Republican incumbent, but it seems like if they're working with the community and working with the paper, they're probably going to be covered in a positive light.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
that didn't seem to be the case, and I didn't read enough of these. I just read that one edition, but from what I saw, yeah, they were pro-incumbent, but the incumbents that they were talking about were all progressive Democrats, and it seemed like their their agenda was to push progressive politics even ahead of covering what was happening locally.
Right. So that sounds good. Like that, we I think in this landscape now where there's such these big divides in so-called news, everyone wants to have their own concern. We need to have conservative news. We need to have liberal news, like to make sure that you can at least find a source that doesn't play that game.
Yeah,
And generally, we would think of as local news, even your local news TV stations, because it's like your local Fox News is different than your local Fox 4, Fox whatever is different than Fox News, the cable network, right? They
right.
deliver different types of things. So to have that, I think is very important because people need to have just the factual news
Sure.
instead of
Although,
these.
what's funny, we talk about how we miss the days of Walter Cronkite or however old you are,
Ted
these,
Koppel or yeah,
yeah, right? Like these newscasters. And if you watch them, you weren't seen as left or right or
right,
Democrat,
right,
right? Everyone just kind of agreed that they were the newscasters of the time and it was credible news. Uh, that may have been a golden age of news or however you want to describe it. But if you look at the history of the US, partisan papers, partisan media really defined the times
right,
pre-Civil War. Certainly, I mean, that's really probably a big cause of the Civil War. The fact that you had people reading completely different media and were coming away with completely different impressions of how the country was operating. I mean, you had
right,
Hamilton and Jefferson each starting their own media companies, right? Or
right,
their own wings of media.
right,
You have certainly them being partisan, going at each other with their views. And so what we're seeing now, in some respects, is a return to how it was when a country was founded. Now, that doesn't make it better, right? Because, like we said, that led to the Civil War. And so many people now are saying we're almost at the point of civil war. So history shows us that that's not necessarily a good thing, but it's also not a new thing, what we're seeing now.
right. And that becomes it when you're doing that, it's less news and more propaganda at that point.
Right, right, right.
So,
No, it's really fascinating trying to figure out how to get to the neutral place because everything you say and everything you report can come off as politically biased depending on your point of view, even if you're trying to be neutral, right? Like I talked about our local papers, they try to present stories in a neutral way, but you can read in a certain political bend to what they're reporting or how they're reporting things, how they're covering things, right?
yeah, or what they choose to cover.
Right, what they choose to cover, how they go about covering it, what they're leaving out, whom they're interviewing, how
Mhm.
they're phrasing the headline. There's a ton of things you can read into that will give you the impression that they're political. I mean, it seems like people overall are going to say they're political when they're covering things in a way that they disagree with, and they're just giving the news when they're covering them in a way that they agree with.
Right.
So it's not
Yeah.
easy, right? It's not as easy as it sounds because I think it sounds like the solution is well, just cover the news, be politically neutral, right? But even trying to do that, people will read that as you having a political agenda.
Sure, sure. Absolutely. That's too bad as well.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, we had a great discussion here as always.
I think so. So, what's the bottom line in your opinion?
I would say the bottom line is look for moments of humanity. I think turning down the temperature is something we hear about often, but it can just become another buzz term. Sure, we all agree with it in principle, but what does that mean? What does that look like? How
Mm,
can we begin to relate to each other and have human conversations with each other without being at each other's throats because we disagree, and we often disagree about things that are very high stakes and emotional, certainly.
mm,
One of the ways we can do that is by coming together, enjoying, for example, comedy together, enjoying entertainment, music, right? We come from a music background, and I think people sometimes dismiss that as, oh, it's just entertainment. It's just like a joke. That's not serious. We talk about serious issues on here. That stuff isn't serious. But I think there is very serious value in what that brings to society. That's why, for example, we push for more arts and music in schools, right? It isn't a joke. It's about being more well-rounded. It's about moving people. And like we said, if you want to move people to a better place, you have to be able to relate to them. They have to be able to relate to you. And these are ways that you can do that. It isn't only about the serious policy discussions. You can move the needle on those by having moments of humanity.
Absolutely. Excellently said. And people can join with us and have those discussions. Everywhere podcasts are available, also on social media, also on YouTube. Come through, drop comments, get involved in the conversation, and leave your thoughts and be a part of that. So.
Yes. As always, we've got work to do, and we will catch you next time. Thank you all for joining us.